And, I love the new year for getting people pumped up about doing better in, a bunch of different areas in life, or, ticking off some things from the bucket list or some goals and things that you want to be doing. So perfect timing to, jump in. For just saw that question come through as well. For anyone that's just jumping in, we are just kicking off now, because I realized at the start there was nobody here, so it wasn't you. It was totally us. So yes, the session will be recorded. Yes, we will share it afterwards. But no, you haven't actually missed anything. So don't sweat it. So yeah, look, guys, as we're going through today, what I want to help you guys understand is some of the key principles that you can use to do better with your money. I think, everyone's situation's unique, but there is no one set of steps that every single person can follow to take them from where they are to money success. So instead of me sitting up here today talking about the surefire 17 steps to become a multimillionaire in the next 3 months, instead, what I'm going to help you do is understand the key questions that you need to ask and answer to nail it with your money, and to make sure that you're aware of the key areas that you need to get right. As I said, for anyone that's just jumping in, I'm going to answer questions as we go through. Please pop them into the Q&A just to make sure your questions get answered as well. Also, just want to give a big shout out to our event partners for this event, Pearler. If you're not already familiar with Pearler, they're a ripping investment platform that help people action some of the ideas that we'll cover off today. So you should absolutely check them out. And sort of on that note, though, guys, before I jump into the content, please don't rush out and make any big decisions off the back of what we cover. I strongly suggest you seek out personalized advice before jumping in. Also, for anyone that's new to our content, we do a bunch of content, so feel free to check that out. More events. Our next event is already listed on Eventbrite, so you can jump on Eventbrite. I'll make sure that the links are definitely working this time for that event. But check those out. Podcasts, bunch of free money education on our socials, as well as tools and resources on the Pivot Wealth website as well. So feel free to get around that as well. And guys, look, before I jump into the content, look, I know that some people need to jump off early, and I had a couple of requests, but we're going to cover a fair bit of ground today. This stuff is our jam, so I get that it's hard. If anyone wants to chat about how they can nail it with their money and what you can do better, we do these 10-minute turbo calls where basically talk through the opportunities for you, give you a bit of no BS Q&A, and help you understand what you could do. If we think we can help, we can talk about how. If not, we're more than happy to point you in the right direction. I've just popped a link into the chat, not the Q&A, the chat, that you can check out one of those sessions as well. I will reshare that link at the end, but had some requests from people that need to jump early. So if you want to get around that, feel free to check it out. So guys, look, getting into it, everyone's situation, as I said, is unique, but there are some common challenges that really hold people back when it comes to their money. The three big ones that we see is information overload. It's like so many options, so much information. It's sort of like you're drinking from a fire hose, really hard to know who to listen to and who to trust. The second is that people struggle to find the right balance between how do you make sure that you're getting ahead enough to set up the tomorrow you want, but while you live a good today, particularly at the moment, with the cost of living, rental crisis, interest rates, inflation, all of that sort of stuff. The balance is not easy to find, but it is really important to find. Got a few tips that can help with that as we go through today as well. And then the third one is the fear of making mistakes. This is probably one of the biggest ones, that no one wants to do something dumb that ends up costing them a bunch of money. So as a result, what happens is that people end up stuck, and they end up stuck, not stuck doing nothing, but often you're just stuck doing the same thing that you've been doing in the past. What that really means, though, is that you're actually missing out on the opportunity to get the money that you've already got working harder for you. So what we've found from doing this with hundreds of people over a long period of time is that there's three areas that you need to get right if you really want to nail it with your money. They are your structure, strategy, and solution. So your structure is all about making it easy to save and making it easy to manage your money, but importantly, making it crystal clear how much money you've got to work with when it comes to your saving, your investing, your paying down debt, buying property, or whatever those things are. The next element is your strategy, and that's all about being clear on the pathways that can take you from where you are to where you want to be. Do you buy shares? Do you buy a property? Do you crank your super? Do you do some sort of combination? Really understanding the financial and the non-financial impacts and choosing the best pathway forward for you. And then the third element here is about the investment solutions and the products that you use to back up your strategy. And what you want here is you want to make sure your investments in particular are giving you reliable, consistent progress, and that you're avoiding the chances of downsides and setbacks and those momentum killing mistakes. Now, what we've found is that if any one of these three elements is missing, it doesn't matter how well you're doing in the other areas, you're never going to be able to truly nail it with your money. So it doesn't matter if you've got a ripping strategy and awesome investments. If you don't have a good structure, it's like you're working with the leaky bucket. It's also going to be almost impossible to have a ripping strategy because you need to know your numbers to know what you've got to work with. If you've got a great structure and great investments, no strategy, you're going to be leaving a whole bunch of money on the table, and you're going to be leaving a bunch of peace of mind and confidence on the table. And then if you don't have good investments, well, you blow up your cash, and that's clearly a total disaster. So you need to nail all three of these areas. Otherwise, if one of them is lacking, it's going to end up dragging down on the rest. The good news is, though, that as we go through today, I'm going to share with you some of the key frameworks that we use to make it easier for you to level up in these areas as well. Now, I will just say that you don't need to be an expert to improve the position that you're in today. And a lot of people, I think, get really overwhelmed with this money stuff, that it's like you think about being really successful with your money and you think, oh, I'm going to need to know all of this stuff about tax, and I'm going to need to understand the whole investment world and how super funds work and what are the tax strategies I should use and how property investing works and all these different things. Now, those are all important things, and it's all knowledge that you should build over time. But you don't need to know all of that right now. You just need to know enough to take your next step. So what I want for each one of you guys today is that as we go through the content, you're getting clearer on what the smartest next step is for you, as well as knowing how you can start to actually take that step to put yourself in a position to go forward. And look, I hope you guys get some great ideas out of what we cover today, but action is what will deliver results. Because if you get all these great ideas, but then nothing changes, then nothing is going to change. So you need to, set up that savings account, start that investment plan, buy that property, pay down that bit of debt, whatever those things are. That is what's going to deliver you the extra dollars in your bank account, the extra money on your wealth position over time. So guys, with that frame up, I wanted to share an example with you talking about how to replace your employment income with investment income. And I put out a book last year, Replace Your Salary by Investing. It got me thinking quite a lot about what money success really is all about. And I came down to the fact that ultimately, the definition of money success is that you've got enough investments to give you the income so that you can have the lifestyle that you want. So ultimately, replacing your employment income with investment income is really part of that. So give you an example here. I've used the average income in Australia, $92,000. Now, it is the average. It's not the median, just if anyone's wondering about that number. But $92,000. If you wanted to replace an income of $92,000 each year, you'd need to have about $1.84 million in investments to give you that level of income. How we get to that point is using what's called the 5% rule, which is a bit of a rough rule, but it's actually fairly accurate overall. It's based on the fact that the long-term return on the share market is a bit over 9%. And from that 9%, you can take off an amount of a percent or so for fees. You can take off another couple of percent for inflation. That leaves you with about 5% that you can draw from an income. So pretty much, if you had $1.84 million in your bank account right now, you'd be able to get an income from that money of about $92,000 in the next 12 months. You'd have to invest it into some investments, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But essentially, that's what it would give you. So the question then is, well, how much would you need to save and invest to build up $1.84 million? And the answer is that it depends on when you get started. So basically, if you're 20 years old today, to build up that $1.84 million by age 60, you need to save and invest about $10.10 a day. If you're 30, you need to save $27 a day. If you're 40, you need to save $81 a day. And if you're 50, you need to save $296 a day. Now, $10 a day, that's something, it's not nothing, but it's, most people should be able to do that. $70 a week, it's the cost of a couple of cups of coffee, depending on where you buy coffee. So doable. $27 a day, we're talking about $200 a week now. It's getting a little bit harder, but it's probably still achievable. But then when you get to these later targets, 40 and 50, where you've got $81 a day, that's like 500 and something after tax dollars a week. It's getting pretty challenging. And $296 a day, well, most people don't earn that, let alone have the ability to save that amount of money. So that makes it pretty challenging. The reason that I put this example here is to show that the sooner you get started, the less you need to do to end up in exactly the same position. I've got a couple more examples to share as we go through today as well. But, I do a lot of content, do a lot of sessions like this, and see people that they get all pumped up to do stuff, but then when they walk away, when life gets in the way, things competing for their attention, it's confusing, too hard, not sure how to do it, don't want to make a mistake. So you end up doing nothing. Before you know it, all this time's passed, and then you just have to do more and sacrifice more to end up in exactly the same position. So the key message here is that you have to get started. The good news is, for anyone getting started now or getting started seriously now, we've got the perfect conditions for investing. Share markets are down. Property market is soft. Crypto market is down. The upside potential is huge. And it means that risk management is really important, but there's a ton of money to be made. And it's downturns like this, it's these tricky periods that are the best times to get ahead. There's only so many golden years when it comes to investing that you actually get. Now, Pearl are actually our partner for this event. They put out this really interesting piece of content a little while back, and they looked at when the best days in investment markets were over the last like 30 years. And they pretty much found that if you had 10 grand invested 30 years ago, it would have grown to be a bit over $200,000 just by investing into, they looked at the S&P 500 share market index. What they found was that if you missed out on the best days in markets over that 30-year period, and I think it was only like 30 days that you weren't investing for, that instead of having 200,000, you only had like $37,000. The really interesting part of that data that they found was that at least half of the best days in markets were in periods where the market was going down, in what's called a bear market. They found that another 25% of the best days were immediately after a bear market, when the market started to recover, which tells me that if you're not investing when the markets are turbulent and going down, then you're going to miss out on a ton of the upside. So I think that's really important and powerful. And I get that it's scary. I get that it's scary investing in these times, and you've got, this media talk and people talking about the share market's going to crash and the property market's going to crash, and everyone's worried about losing money. But ultimately, these are some of the best times that you can possibly be investing in. So I want to start by talking about structure. And when it comes to structure, I'm talking about, making it easy to save and making it easy to manage your money. Now, here I'm going to share with you the banking system that I use personally to manage my money and to make it easier for me to save. And the same system that we've used with literally hundreds of people to help them make it easier to save as well. But before I get into the really granular tactical stuff, I want to start by talking big picture about how you're allocating your money. Now, just before I jump into that, I could just see a question came through. If I'm aiming to have a nice life by 60, what is the difference between investing privately versus superannuation investment? That's a great question. And essentially, there's no difference apart from the fact that super has a lower tax rate applied to it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about super as we go through. A lower rate of tax, meaning that you can save tax deductively into your super fund, and that once the money's inside your super, you'll pay less tax on the growth because the maximum rate of tax that applies inside superannuation is 15%. What that means is that your super fund is actually the most tax effective place for you to save money for the future. The only downside when you invest through your super fund is that your money is trapped there until you can access your super money under the rules. Now, that is currently age 60. The government do have a nasty habit of tinkering with the rules around super, but when they do change the goalposts, they don't tend to do it retrospectively. So I don't want to fearmonger around, that they're going to push out the goalpost, but I think that probably will change at some point. That being said, I think if you're comfortable to have your money locked in super, it's going to be heaps easier for you to save in your super fund because you can save tax deductibly, and and the money will grow faster because you're paying less tax on it as well. So yeah, so if you're comfortable with the money being locked up there, happy days. It's a really solid approach, and it's definitely worth seriously looking at. For everybody else, I think it's like, super, because of those tax concessions, they are very lucrative. Because of the fact that your money is tied up in super, it's probably not going to be the first strategy that you go to, but it also shouldn't be the last. Another question here from Ritz says, how good is to be invested in super for long term, or use the money from super to buy shares, property for better growth in long term, also considering tax implications? Oh, good. I'm not 100% following that question, Ritz, so maybe you can clarify it. But ultimately, if you're asking about, like, do you need to invest the money into your super, then the answer is probably yes. That your super fund is like an investment account, like any other investment account, except for the fact that you can't actually touch the money. So if you were to have all of your money put into super and save it in a cash option, probably not going to grow that much. I'm going to talk about that a little bit in this section here. You're probably wanting to be looking at investing into shares and property type investments where you're going to actually see that growth over time as well. So I hope that helps, Ritz, but please clarify if I was off the mark there. All right, so I can see a few more questions coming in, guys. Please keep those questions coming. I love that. I'm just going to crack on with this section, and then I'll circle back to some of the questions. So when you're allocating your money, whether you're allocating money that you've got sitting in a bank account or your regular income that you've got coming in from your pay every week, month, or fortnight, or whatever, that you've essentially got two choices. You can allocate it to your spending today. You can spend the money now. You can enjoy it now, or you can allocate it to your spending in the future. When you allocate money to the future, what you're talking about is saving and investments. Now, there are 5 key options that you can use when it comes to investing your money for the future. Save money in cash. You can pay down debt. You can buy shares or managed funds or ETFs. I put them all in the same bucket. Buy property. You can crank your super. And then you've got some alternatives, crypto and other alternative investments sort of on the side. But just focusing on these 5 things, the same 5 options that are available to all people around the world. The first 2 things that I mentioned, save money in cash and pay down debt, they're 2 really important things to do. They're also 2 things that are never going to get you wealthy. You're never going to get wealthy or rich saving money in a bank account or just paying down debt. If you want to build wealth, you need to choose shares, property, or super, or some sort of combination, money that's going to actually grow for you into the future. The issue is, though, that with shares, property, and superannuation, that they are subject to the ups and downs of the market. Share market goes up, share market goes down, property market goes up, property market goes down. Super is attached to both of those markets. So if you're investing into growth investments, you need to make sure that you firstly choose good investments. The second thing you need to do is make sure that you're never forced to sell those investments at a bad time. Because if you choose good investments and you're never forced to sell those good investments at a bad time, you've got the ability then to let your good investments do what good investments do over the long term, which is make you a bunch of money. How you make sure that you're never forced to sell your good investments at a bad time is you need to make sure that you've got, when you allocate money from the today side of the ledger to the future side, that you're never forced to bring it back to the other side at a time that you weren't expecting. And how you make sure that that happens, you just need to make sure that all of the spending that you want or need to do is provided for. Because if you've got enough money to cover all of the expenses or all of the spending that you want or need to do, that you're never going to be forced to sell your investments at a bad time, or at any time, really. And the good news is there's only so many types of expenses that people have. You've got your fixed costs, that's your rent, bills, the boring stuff. You've got your spending, that's walking around money, meals, entertainment, clothes, shoes, etc. Debt, everyone's least favorite category. Lifestyle, that's like your travel fund, your savings to spend, think new tech, toys, stuff for the house, travel, weekend away, overseas trip, whatever those things are. And then you've got your savings and investments. So the first step, if you want to set up a savings plan or a budget, is to just lay out and go, what money have you got coming in? Where do you want to be allocating your money across these categories in particular, fixed spending, debt, and lifestyle? And then what money is left over for your savings and investments? And you want to keep circling around between those two until you're happy with how much you're spending, that you've got all your spending needs covered and a few of your wants as well, and that you're happy with how much you're saving. That's essentially doing a budget, and that gives you a good plan. And having a good plan is good. But I think everyone, myself included, has done a budget that hasn't worked before. So a plan is only half the battle. That if you want to get good results, you need a system that makes it easy. And so that's why when, like with my own money, with our clients, we advocate having different, like a bucket approach to your banking, so that you've got different accounts for these different buckets of money. So you end up with the right money in the right places at the right time. Now, the outcome here is that you've got an automatic savings system where your savings is building up without you having to think about it or do anything. You can see that money growing, and therefore you're getting a pump up with your motivation to keep things moving forward. That you've got enough money to spend on the areas that you want, bills paid without you having to think about them, some guilt-free spending to walk around with a clear line of sight on exactly how much you need to spend. Debt's getting repaid, money building up for your next weekend away or next new piece of kit that you want for the house or whatever. And it all happens without you having to think too much about it. So it's super powerful. Now, this is our system, and obviously I'm completely biased and I think it's the best system ever because I created it. But the important thing here is not that you use exactly this system, but that you have a system. The quote that I skipped through before was one from James Clear, and it's a great one from his book, Atomic Habits. It says, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And money, it's like so true when it comes to your money management, that if you don't have good systems around how you're saving, how you're investing, how you're hitting your goals, how you're reviewing your progress, it's all going to fall apart. So it's a total game changer. And what this also does, this system, is that it forces you to make conscious spending choices, and it changes your spending habits and behaviors as well. Caleb's got a question that says, how much is a good benchmark to hold in savings to ensure that you don't have to liquidate investments at a bad time? Look, it depends. It really depends on you and your situation. I don't think there's one right answer, but I think a reasonable starting point for how much to have on your savings account, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Caleb, that you need to have an amount here to fall back on in the event of an emergency. I would say a reasonable starting point is around 3 months of your core expenses here. What are the expenses that if your income turned off tomorrow that you would need to actually cover in this period? And about 3 months is a starting point. Now, some people might want a bit more depending on the nature of their work, whether they work for themselves, whether they work in government, whether they've got stability, less stability, freelance, whatever. But I think that's probably a reasonable starting point. Couple of other questions here. Given what you've said about Patrina asked, how many bank accounts do I have? I don't know that I want to publicly answer that question, but it's a lot. But there are a lot of accounts under my businesses. But in my personal savings system, I have this many accounts, plus I actually have 2 of these, and we have a joint account for our household. And then my wife has her own spending account as well. So if you were to look at my family unit, it would be 5, 6, 7, 8. But I've got probably a couple of dozen more under my business entity. So yeah, I don't know if that would be my suggested approach necessarily. Yeah, and I think you're probably right there, Petrina. Another question. Given what you've said about investing at the wrong time, is it then better not to automate our investments, but monitor our investments in the market so we do invest at the best time, i.e. bear market drops in the market to make better returns? Good question. And a lot of people think the same way. The only problem is that you don't know what the best days in investment markets are until after they've been. If the share market rang a nice little bell at the start of the day and said today is going to be one of the best days for investing, you would choose to only ever invest on those days, and you could ignore the other days and you'd make a ton of money. Unfortunately, they don't have one of those bells. And it doesn't actually work like that. So yeah, you can't actually pick the best days. And so look, there's a heap of different approaches to this, and we've got there's another question about like looking at the market, the long-term market return here. Like there's a couple of ways to answer this, but for me, to give you some insight, how I invest personally, I invest every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Every Wednesday, I have an automatic debit that comes out of my account on Monday. It goes into my investment account on Tuesday and it gets invested on Wednesday at 11 a.m. I've been doing that every single week for the last 18 months at least, and probably actually a bit longer than that in another account, but I didn't have an automated before. So I do that because I know that the markets are down. And look, I know, for example, that last week the share markets were up. The first couple of days of this week, the share market is a bit down. I do think about it, but I don't change anything because I know that if I'm sitting there, I'm sitting there going, oh, the market's actually up 3% yesterday or 2% or down, or now I should do more, or now I should do less. I know that I'm not going to probably make the right decision. And me thinking about it and pausing is going to mean that I invest less because I'll go, oh, too hard, don't end up doing it. And then I don't get the compounding over time. So yeah, so you can try and time the market, but the professionals can't do it right. So I think you and I probably have very little, only unless you get really lucky, you're probably not going to get it right either. Another question, really good question here about if our offset account doesn't allow us to include multiple buckets. Personally, what I would do is not use an offset account. I think it's important to leverage an offset account as much as you can, and particularly for your bigger buckets of money. But I can guarantee you that if you've got a saving system that works and works well for you, you are going to save so much more money than the extra tiny little bit of interest that you'll save by having an extra $500 in your offset account rather than having it in your bills account to have it automated. So I think that offset accounts, and I put a couple of posts up on how I think offsets are a bit of a conspiracy by the banks, because unless you're ultra disciplined, and there's a very, very small portion of the population that are ultra disciplined, but for most people, if they're spending from a big bucket, don't have clarity, don't have control, you end up just spending more and saving less, and then it costs you a lot more than the interest that you might otherwise save. Another really good question, and a common one at the moment, that says, given how high interest rates are currently, are you better paying the extra off your home loan or investing at the moment? So there's a couple of ways to look at this one. The first is that you can do if you're saying, is it better to do one or the other? There's a simple answer to that question, which is the interest rate on your mortgage, let's call it 6% or 6.5%, say, and then particularly if it's your home mortgage, which is not tax deductible, then that means the hard after-tax cost to you is 6.5%. And you say, what's my expected return by investing into the share market? If I'm using the Australian share market, you look at the 30-year return on the Australian share market, 9.8%. You'd say that the expected return on my shares is 9.8%, which is taxable. So it's probably, even if it's Australian shares and it's franked dividends and there's a bit of tax efficiencies in there, you're probably looking at about 7% after tax. Then you're comparing that to 6.5% in your mortgage. So you're a tiny bit better off by investing. But then you look at it and you look at, well, in periods where after interest rate rises cease, that the average market return in the next 12 months is 15%. So you've got a bit of upside play there as a result of investing in the market. Then you've got the inflation hedge that, when inflation is higher, the shares tend to typically do a little bit more because these companies are charging more for their goods, their revenues go up, their profits go up, their shares go up as a result as well. So there's a little bit of that in there. On the flip side of that, though, that if you had, say, just purchased your first home and you've got a slightly uncomfortably high level of mortgage, you find that a little bit stressful, even though you've been smart about your planning and you know that you can afford it, but you don't like the idea of it, then you might want to take a bit off your mortgage and say, look, I'm prepared to give up a little bit of a return in order to smash down that debt, free up a bit more cash flow, and for me to sleep a little bit better at night. If you've got investment debt, though, that's tax deductible, then it means that your after-tax interest rate is probably closer to 3 or 4%. So then it makes the difference between investment debt, between your investment debt and your share portfolio, probably a little bit more stark. So I hope no right way. It really depends on you, but I hope that makes sense in terms of the approach. Guys, keep those questions coming through. I can see a bunch of great ones on there. I'm just a little bit mindful of time, and I know we kicked off a few minutes late, so I'm just going to crack into this section, and then I'm going to try and power through the content, and then I'm going to do as much of these questions as I can as well. So I want to talk about investments and the investment solutions that you can use to invest into. 4 main types that we'll cover off: shares, managed funds, ETFs. Put them all in one bucket. Property, crypto and startups, and superannuation. Even though I know that superannuation isn't a type of investment, it's just an investment account that allows you to access the other ones. There's a couple of things to call out with that. So talking about shares, when you buy a share, you own a tiny little slice of a particular company. You're then entitled to a tiny little slice of the profit of that company and a tiny little slice of the growth of that company. Share investing is great because it allows you to start small. And it's also nice and flexible that if you do a budget and you might say, I can save $50 a week or $100 a week or whatever that number is for you, you can do that this week and next week and the other week. But then if something changes in your situation, you've got a bit more or a bit less money, you can easily change how much money you're investing. Very different to having a mortgage where it's like you've got to make that mortgage payment month on month on month. So when you're investing through shares, that you can buy the shares direct, and then you're buying a small slice of one particular company. But then you can invest through these pooled investments where you've got managed funds, ETFs, and micro investing, which are all basically investments that allow you to access a pool of shares. That has an advantage in that when you're buying one share, particularly if you're making small regular investments all the time, you're probably only buying 1 or 2 shares at a time, which means that your portfolio is going to be very up and down based on how well those particular companies are doing. Whereas if you're buying a managed fund or an ETF or using a micro investing option, you're choosing one investment, which in turn has hundreds or potentially even thousands of different investments, nice and diversified, and you spread your risk out a lot more. Now, for that reason, for me personally, and when we're advising our clients, we tend to advocate for the pooled investment approach, where you've got a fund, you choose one investment, and you've got a lot of underlying investments in there. When you're investing into these investments, there's 2 schools of thought that you can choose. That you can choose to invest passively, and a passive fund just follows the share market and just tracks the overall share market average return. Or you can use an active fund, which is actively trying to perform better than the market. Now, there's a lot of different ways to be right. And if you ask a bunch of different people, you might get a bunch of different answers on this. But I'm a numbers guy, so I like to go to the stats. And the stats show us that index funds that track the share market perform better more than 80% of the time. In most categories, particularly like the bigger company blue chip categories, that it's more than 90% of the time. What that says to me is that if you're investing and you follow an index fund approach, more than 8 out of 10 times, you're going to end up way better off by taking that approach than you are by trying to either pick your own stocks or follow some active investment manager that's picking those stocks for you. What that also does, particularly for people that are relatively newer to investing or less experienced with investing, Index the because an index fund just tracks it has you owning a little bit of every single company in the country. It means that the only way that that can go to zero is if every single company in the country goes bust at the same time. So think all of the banks go out of business, all of the supermarkets, Telstra, all of the mining companies. Very, very unlikely, firstly. And I can tell you that if that happens, you're probably going to have much bigger problems than your investment portfolio balance, because we're really talking about like a zombie apocalypse type situation. So that should in turn give you a ton of confidence that if you know that your investments are solid and that it will go up and down along with the market, but that so long as the share market continues to smart companies make good money, that investment will go up. In my opinion and experience, it should give you the confidence to invest more, and therefore you're going to build your wealth faster. Now, of the pooled investment types, particularly for people that are new to investing, micro investing, in my opinion, is seriously worth looking at, because with micro investing accounts, it's like an account that you can download on your phone. You open it in 10 minutes flat, and you can be investing starting with as little as 1 cent with some of these accounts. Most of them, it's as low as $5. And you can importantly set up an automatic regular investment plan that allows you to set your investing onto autopilot. You can get on with the other things in your life, knowing that your investments will just actually happen. I can see a few questions coming through. Patrina says, recommendations for getting into index funds, any preferred companies? Look, I can't make any recommendations because, this is not financial advice, but what I would say is that all of the index funds are essentially the same. Like, they're all just tracking the market. They're all super safe. And in fact, I've got this on the next slide, that all companies in Australia, with the product disclosure statement and financial services guide, not that I'm suggesting you need to read them, but those ones that have those really long, boring documents, that means that they're protected and regulated under APRA, which means that your money is safe across all of these different companies. The two biggest fund managers in the world are BlackRock and Vanguard. They've been around forever and a day, so that might be worth looking at. But because of the way that the regulation works, that they are all very similar, and the differences between them you will not notice really unless you've got more than $200,000 actually investing. Similarly, and Michael's got a question here that says, is one share platform better than another for automatic investing? I think it's almost like a checkbox type situation. That does your investment account that you're considering, does it offer automatic investing? And if it does, then that's good. If it doesn't, then you might want to just look for one that does, because I think automatic investing is something that's really crucial for most people. Everyone's time poor. The more you have to do, the more you can run out of time to do or get wrong. And I've got it on the next slide, that you want to focus on a solution that's going to be as easy as possible for you to get the results that you want. So I hope that helps. What I would say as well, you look at the fees on these platforms, they're all largely similar, very similar across the board in terms of how they charge and what they charge. There's a couple of exceptions and a couple of expensive ones out there to look out for, but largely, yeah, they're all very similar. Georgia says, would it cost more in fees if you do micro investing versus, say, CommSec, where you invest $1,000 monthly? I believe $10 is the fee for that. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It depends on the platform. I think a lot of micro investing accounts are, a couple of dollars a month, and then it depends on what you invest into. Also with CommSec, I think that there is a tier that and don't quote me on this, but once you get above a certain amount invested, then they start charging, their fee structure changes a little bit as well. How much is a good weekly amount to invest in shares that's worth it minus fees and commissions, etc.? Yeah, if you're buying direct shares, I'm not too sure, but if you're using a micro investing platform, I would say $5 is the minimum for most of the accounts, and I would say it's absolutely worth it to be investing $5 a week. In fact, for people where they think that or feeling that their money is really tight, I would strongly suggest you consider having a really small investment like that, because it's going to make you feel good, going to drive some motivation, going to help you learn a bit about investments, and then that's going to build your investment knowledge so that I can almost guarantee that if you started investing $5 a week today, within 3 months, you'd be investing more than $5 a week. So I hope that one helps there. I'm going to crack on. I'm just looking at this clock here as well. Property investing. So property, as much as shares are great, property does tend to win over shares. And the reason that it does is because when you buy a property, you use a small deposit and then you have you borrow money from the bank and you have a much bigger impact. That's a much bigger property that's working for you. The downside with property, or the challenge with property, which can be overcome, but the challenge is that you need to make that mortgage payment month on month on month. So your risk management really is crucial. Got an example here showing that, if you were to have $100,000 invested into shares versus using that 100K as a deposit on a $500,000 property, you can see that the property makes you a bunch more money. In fact, over a 30-year period, it's making you an extra $1.5 million. And the reason that it is because it's 5 times the size of your share portfolio. So they've both got their place, but property does tend to win. And I think it's really important for people that are getting started on their investing. Starting with shares and micro investing and those sorts of things makes a ton of sense. But aiming at getting into the property market sooner rather than later, choosing a good property that's going to start growing for you, goes a long way to setting up the wealth outcomes that you want for the future. Crypto and startup investing. I want to put this in the interest of completeness. Look, I think crypto is interesting. Personally, I have a bit of Bitcoin in my own investment portfolio. It's a small bit on the side. And I think where people go wrong, and like thinking back a couple of years when the crypto market was going ballistic, a lot of people were going all in on crypto. And a lot of those people had made a ton of money. A lot of them lost a lot of money shortly after. And I think it can have a place, but if you're investing, you want to have the foundations of your investments set up first with some nice, stable, boring investments. The other thing that I would say with this, and the last bullet point here, how much risk do you need? If you think about your the example that I shared with you guys at the start, saving $10.10 a day makes you $1.8 million to then replace a $90,000 income every year for the rest of your life. You probably don't need a lot more risk than that. And so, if you keep that in mind, that it's natural when we invest that you want to shoot the lights out and you want to make a ton of money, but you probably don't need the extra risk that comes with that. Strategy, and I just wanted to share with you guys here the process that you can follow to plan with your money. Now, this is the process that we guide people through at Pivot Wealth, but it's the same process that basically anybody needs to use if you're looking to set up your own financial money and investment plan. First step, focus in on what a great result looks like. What's really important to you? What is it that you want to work towards? From there, you want to understand what are the moving parts and the things that you can use to, the things that you can draw on to pull into your strategy. That's going to then allow you to look at what are the different pathways that you can follow. Do you buy shares? Do you buy property? Do you crank your super? Do you do some sort of combination? And how do you get smart with your tax planning as a layer over the top of that? From there, you're going to be more drawn to one path that probably going to connect more with giving you the financial outcomes that you want and you being comfortable that your risk is managed, etc. From there, you want to nail it down to say, okay, well, what are the action steps? What are the 27 things that you need to do to turn these great ideas into great outcomes? Try and automate as much as you possibly can. And then that 1 through 5 gives you a plan set up and the track to run on. From there, it's about executing that plan and ticking things over so that you can refine, iterate, and build on your strategy over time. Know that there's a lot there with this stuff, but it's easy to get overwhelmed, but you don't need to do it all. You just need to take the next step. I want to wrap with a few mistakes for you to look out for, and then I'm going to jump in. I can see that there's a ton of questions there, so keep those questions getting in. The first one is not getting started. I touched on this at the start. The power of an idea is in its implementation. It's great to get pumped up about your money, but if you don't actually do anything, set up the savings account, set up the regular investment plan, whatever it is, then you're not going to get, nothing's going to change and you're not going to get any outcomes. Unconsciously prioritizing, and that's with your spending, that where if your money's all in a big pile, you're always going to be prioritizing in the moment, and it's going to be hard to prioritize with the same sort of thinking that you would do when you step up and think 50,000 foot level. No targets or plan is another one. And we often underestimate how much we can do over the long term, but overestimate how much we should do on the over the short term. And so I think it's really, really important to anytime you're doing anything with your money that you're clear on the outcomes that you're working towards. Where should your money be in a month, in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? Because it's only by having those that you can know, is what you're doing enough? Should you be happy with what you're doing? Do you need to do more? Are you doing too much? And can you take your foot off the pedal a little bit? Uh, it's super, super powerful in terms of the impact that that actually has. So guys, I am going to crack into those questions, but just a bit in terms of next steps. Look, I will just call out, everyone's got a certain level of financial potential, but only a small number of people unlock what's really possible. Particularly at the moment, I think it's really easy to go, oh, I'm not where I want to be. I don't have my dream home yet. I'm not saving enough. I'm not doing these things. And I don't want to take away from the fact that I know that it's tough out there to keep up cost of living, all of those sorts of things. But the reality is that you have these 8 levers that are available to you that you can use to improve the position that you're in. You can spend less money now, and then you're going to be saving more money. You're going to spend less money in the future, and that means that you can have lower targets for the future. It means that you're going to get there faster. You can earn more money, and this is something that a lot of people don't think about, because there's a limit on how much you can cut your expenses, but there's no limit on how much you can increase your income. Taking extra hours at work, starting a side hustle, doing some gig work, getting pay rise, promotion, furthering your career, changing jobs or industries, all things that you can do to earn more money and add more to your bottom line. You can invest in shorter bursts, invest and work for longer, pay less tax. That's my favorite one, apart from earning more, using more debt, and taking on more risk in your investments. It's the same levers that are available to every person. So if you're not really happy with the position that you're in or the trajectory that you're on with your money, know that no one's going to change this stuff for you, and it is all within your control. Now, that's not to say that some of these things you might look at and go, absolutely not. That's just not possible, or that's just not for me. There might be a couple on there that you go, oh, maybe, maybe not. But there might be 1 or 2, hopefully there is, that you go, well, actually, yeah, that's something that I could seriously have a crack at. And that's going to move the dial in terms of my money. Now, this is your plan. It's your money. Everything is within your control. So only you know at the end of the day, what suits you best. Now, I'm just going to push through a couple of these ones. So money is a momentum game ultimately. And, you just need to take the next step. And the first step is always the hardest. But once you take that step, you build some momentum that you can leverage to make the next steps easier and easier. Your focus here is key. And as I said at the start, you don't need to know it all, because you're going to learn from your next step. Now, I want to share this model talking about getting from where you are to future state with your money. Now, when you think like in the future, every single one of you guys are going to be somewhere on the spectrum. Some of you are going to be doing really well. Some of you doing not so well. When people think about getting from where they are to future state with their money, they think about their progression like a straight line. But because of the compounding impact of time and money, it's actually a curve. So if you're not 100% on track to end up exactly where you want to be with your money, you need to do some stuff to jump the line. That means set up the savings account, the investment plan, pay down that bit of credit card debt, ditch the buy now, pay later, whatever those things are. Once you've taken those steps, then you just need to take the next step and the next step and the next step, which is easier because you're already on the path. But the longer you leave it, the more time goes on, the jumping the line piece becomes more and more painful, and putting yourself in the best position can become impossible. Like I shared with you at the start, that example, the sooner you get started, the less you need to do, the less sacrifice you need to make to end up exactly where you want to be. So this is my pep talk, whatever that action is, take it now. And I'll leave you with this quote from Derek Sivers before I crack into the Q&A. If information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with perfect abs. I think it's bang on point and talks to the fact that, from today, I hope you guys have got a bunch of great ideas, but please do something with them, because otherwise it's not going to turn into results. Now, as I touched on at the start, this is exactly the sort of stuff that we help people with. So if you want to chat about how we can help or get some tips on what you can do to move forward, you can book this 10-minute chat with us. I've just popped the link into the chat as well. in these 10-minute calls, it's basically just, what are you thinking? Where are things at? Give you a bit of a Q&A and help you understand the smart next steps you can take with your money. If we think we can help, we can talk about how. If we don't think we can help, we'll point you in the right direction. So that link is in the chat. As I said, there's a ton of content that we put out as well. So if you want to get around that, you're very welcome to. And I'll leave that one up on the screen and dive into the questions. For anyone asking about the recordings, yes, we will share the recording with you afterwards. Question is, where do I start at 50? Well, you start at the next step. I think set some targets, understand your trajectory, and see, where do you want to get to? Is what you're doing now enough? Do you need to push a bit more? And particularly if you've got a shorter window, it's like if you're trying to set up to have kids in a few years' time, or you want to start a business or something like that. If you've got a shorter runway, it's even more important that you understand the trajectory that you're on and see how that's tracking. Because if you want to change something, the easiest time to do that is now. If you wait until a couple more years have passed, you're only going to be cutting yourself off to options. So you want to understand that, and then you can make a call on what is the smartest thing for you. Question: would you recommend investing in a low risk or high risk portfolio for shares? We would. I suppose it depends on the sorts of investments or what your strategy actually is. But if you're thinking growth for the long term, generally our approach is quality share investments, premium blue chip investments that are set up for the long term that will deliver the results that you want. That way you can have more confidence and peace of mind. But ultimately it comes down to your objectives as well. Rosanna says, if I'm aiming for a smaller amount by age 60, like only 1 mil, how much would you need to invest daily? Look at the Money Smart, have a bunch of awesome calculators on their website that you can look at. So target savings calculator tell you exactly how much you need to get save $1 million and invest it. So there's also some guides on the Pivot Wealth website if you want some tips on how you can actually do that as well. So I hope that helps, Rosanna. Another question: if you're in your mid-20s and you already own one property, still has a mortgage, and investing in super and shares, would you use your savings to buy another property or buy more shares if your aim is to grow long-term wealth? I would say that property is going to deliver you more of a return so long as you can deal with the cash flow of it because of the power of leverage and the tax efficiencies that come along with it. So guys, look, really appreciate all the questions. Great to have you guys on. Check out our other content if you want to hear more. Apologies for anyone that hasn't been able to get their questions answered. Hit me up on socials and I'm happy to do that as well. Other than that, guys, hope you got some great ideas and I look forward to catching you next time. Bye for now.